Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving deep, way deep into the aftermath of a tragedy that's, well, it's kind of become this larger-than-life event in history.
It definitely casts a long shadow, that's for sure.
Yeah, we're talking about the Titanic, of course. But this isn't just another rehashing of the sinking. We're going beyond that, exploring the lives of those who survived.
Exactly. We're taking you through Shadow of the Titanic. The book, it goes beyond just, the event itself, and it uncovers all these extraordinary stories of the survivors, how their lives were shaped by what they experienced.
And wow, talk about a range of experiences.
hmm
The book really drives home how survival wasn't like a one-size-fits-all thing.
Right, right. You have some who, they found a way to find resilience, even reinvented themselves in a way. And then you have others who were just absolutely crippled by guilt and trauma. They were haunted by it for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, just thinking about the different paths their lives took. I mean, you have someone like Madeline Astor who, after losing her husband, inherited a fortune and kind of became this symbol of, I don't know, resilience, I guess.
Right. And then on the flip side, you have the Navratil brothers, those two young boys who were separated from their mother during the chaos and basically left to piece together their identities without her. It's a powerful reminder that there's no single narrative when it comes to survival.
Absolutely. It's these individual stories that really make Shadow of the Titanic so gripping. And one that really stuck with me was Constance Willard, a first-class passenger. She basically disappeared from public life after the sinking, spending decades in a California sanatorium.
Yeah, she's such a fascinating case study in how trauma can manifest. The book mentions this really poignant anecdote about how when the staff showed the film A Night to Remember, Constance just sat there, not saying a word, completely ignoring the Titanic on screen.
It's like she was trying to erase that night from her memory altogether.
Exactly. And to add to the mystery, on the 50th anniversary of the sinking, the staff at the sanatorium were warned to be on the lookout for reporters, like they were protecting a recluse or something.
Wow, talk about living under the weight of that experience. But, in contrast to Constance's retreat, you have those survivors who actually use their experience as, I don't know, as fuel for some pretty remarkable achievement.
Oh, absolutely. One that comes to mind is Helen Churchill Candy. She was a journalist, and after surviving the Titanic, she went on to explore Asia, really extensively. She even ended up publishing a book about Cambodian temples.
It's like facing death so closely gave her this incredible thirst for life and adventure. And then you have Renee Harris, who, even though she lost her husband on the Titanic, went on to become this pioneering figure in American theater.
It's really incredible how she channeled her grief into something so, so powerful and creative.
And it's almost like surviving the Titanic gave her this platform, The book even mentions how people only seem to take an interest in her career after they found out she was a Titanic survivor. But not all the stories are about resilience or finding triumph in the face of tragedy.
Oh, you're right. You're right. The book also explores how some individuals actually sought to capitalize on the tragedy. It's a bit unsettling, to be honest.
Yeah, like Dorothy Gibson, the actress. She starred in the first Titanic film, like just weeks after the sinking. And get this, she even wore the same dress she'd had on that night.
It's almost too much to process, While some were still grappling with the trauma, others saw it as an opportunity for fame and spectacle. And Dorothy's life after that, it just gets even more, well, let's say dramatic. Illicit love affairs, accusations of spying during World War II, even internment in a concentration camp. It's a wild ride.
It makes you wonder if that brush with death on the Titanic somehow, shaped her trajectory, leading to this life of extremes. But to really grasp the impact of the sinking, I think we need to go back to that night itself. And the book, it paints such a vivid picture. It's not just chaos and panic, There are these moments of, well, almost normalcy that they really stick with you.
Yeah, there are these details that really highlight just how differently people reacted to the unfolding disaster. Like Colonel Gracie, he describes having a pretty lavish meal that night, enjoying the ship's, fancy food and drinks.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it? Knowing what was about to happen and he's just, having a nice dinner.
Right. And then you have Edith Rosenbaum, this fashion journalist, who, well, she was focused on her wardrobe. The book goes into detail about how meticulously she'd packed for the voyage.
It's almost like a coping mechanism, focusing on the familiar, the everyday, as a way to kind of shield themselves from the enormity of what was happening.
And then there's this This detail that just gives me chills every time I think about it. The second-class passengers, they gathered for a hymn service that night, and they were singing songs about, the dangers at sea.
Oh, wow. Talk about foreshadowing. It's just eerie. It's like a scene from a movie.
Right. And while some were singing hymns, others were making decisions that would spur controversy for years to come.
Like the Duff Gordons, right?
Exactly. Sir Cosmo and Lady Duff Gordon, they were this wealthy couple whose escape in a lifeboat with a lot of empty seats, became a huge scandal.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the empty seats. There were these accusations of cowardice and bribery surrounding their escape.
Right. And Lady Duff Gordon, she allegedly made some pretty insensitive remarks about not wanting to go back and help those who were, struggling in the water.
And to top it all off, they gave conflicting accounts at the inquiry afterward. It's like they were trying to rewrite history, downplay their role in the whole tragedy.
And when you look into Lucille's background, Lady Duff Gordon, she was this famous fashion designer known for being, well, pretty dramatic and attention-seeking.
So it's almost like her behavior on the Titanic fits into this pattern, right? This need for attention, even in the midst of such a horrific event.
Exactly. And that desire for the spotlight, it kind of followed her for years after. There's even a controversy in the book about a silk kimono she claimed to have worn that night, which her descendants have disputed.
The Duff Gordons, they definitely represent the more controversial side of the Titanic legacy, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. But then you have Bruce Isme, the managing director of the White Star Line, who became kind of this scapegoat for public outrage.
His story is just heartbreaking. He was overwhelmed by survivors' guilt, and he withdrew from public life after the sinking, burdened by the enormity of what had happened.
And the book talks about how he actually received letters from a young girl expressing sympathy for him. It's a reminder that even amidst all the blame and anger, there were those who offered compassion.
It really speaks to the complex range of emotions that surrounded the disaster. But of course, we can't ignore the long-term psychological impact the sinking had on many of the survivors.
Yeah, Shadow of the Titanic sheds light on so many individuals who struggled to cope with the aftermath, like William A. Lucas, this crew member who was just tormented by the decisions he had to make during the sinking. He carried that guilt for years.
And there's Anna de Messmaker, whose mental health deteriorated so badly after being separated from her husband during the chaos that she ended up being institutionalized.
It really underscores how trauma doesn't just disappear, The scars, both visible and invisible, can linger for a lifetime.
And these stories, they raise such important questions about how we process and cope with events of this magnitude, how we find meaning or even just a sliver of peace after experiencing something so horrific.
Exactly. And sometimes that search for peace can lead to tragic consequences. The book talks about Washington Dodge, this first-class passenger who, years after the sinking, faced accusations of impropriety in his business dealings.
And ultimately, driven by this belief that he should have died on the Titanic to preserve his honor, he took his own life.
It's a stark reminder of how deeply guilt and self-blame can affect someone even years later. It's like he felt he was living on borrowed time.
But amidst all this tragedy and guilt, Shadow of the Titanic also shares stories of resilience and finding light in the darkness, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Jack Thayer, for example, he survived this harrowing plunge into the icy ocean, but he went on to lead a full life, even though he rarely talked about the Titanic, even to his family.
It's like silence was his way of coping, compartmentalizing the trauma and finding a way to move forward.
And then you have the story of the Navratil brothers, the orphans of the deep, who were separated from their mother during the sinking.
And it's amazing how their story kind of resurfaced decades later, thanks to the efforts of another passenger, Sidney Tyler.
Michel Navratil, the older brother, he embarked on this journey to reclaim his past, even visiting his father's grave in Halifax.
It seems like he found a way to make peace with the tragedy, to honor his family's legacy, while also carving out his own path in life. It's such a powerful story.
It is, and it leads us to this larger question of why we're still so fascinated by the Titanic, even after all these years. Titanic fever, as the book calls it.
It's explored the different waves of public fascination over the decades, from the sinking itself to the discovery of the wreck back in 1985.
Right, and each time there's this renewed desire to understand, to connect with those who are there, and to really grapple with the bigger questions about, humanity the tragedy raises.
It's like the Titanic is this mirror reflecting our own anxieties and fascinations with mortality, disaster, and the whole spectrum of human behavior.
And that's what makes Shadow of the Titanic such a compelling read. It takes us beyond the headlines, offering these intimate glimpses into the lives of the survivors and the ripple effects of that night.
It challenges us to think about the choices people made, the societal factors that contributed to the tragedy, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable hardship.
So, having explored all these contrasting fates and the ways survivors coped with the aftermath, what stands out to you the most? What really resonated with you on a personal level? I keep coming back to Washington Dodge and just how his story ended. The fact that he survived the sinking only to be driven to suicide years later by these accusations, it really highlights the immense pressure to maintain one's honor back then. I mean, looking back, the accusations themselves seem, well, almost trivial.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder of how societal pressures and the weight of guilt can have such a profound impact on someone's life. And it makes you wonder how many others carried similar burdens, in silence, unable to truly escape the shadow of that night.
Absolutely. And it makes those stories of the survivors who did manage to find a way to turn their experience to something positive, it makes them even more remarkable. Like Helen Churchill Candy, she embraced life so fully after the Titanic. Her adventures, her writing, it's a real testament to the human spirit's ability to find purpose and meaning even after confronting such a profound loss.
It's incredibly inspiring. Her story and Renee Harris's as well, they refused to let the tragedy define them. And instead, they channeled their experiences into these incredible achievements. It's a reminder that resilience can take so many forms.
It really can. And while their stories are incredibly moving, the book also uncovers some rather surprising, almost unbelievable details about the night of the sinking itself. For instance, did you know that some passengers were actually having snowball fights on deck?
Snowball fights.
Yeah.
On the Titanic.
Yeah, with the ice that had landed on deck after the iceberg collision, no less.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, it speaks to that initial disbelief, almost a sense of amusement that some passengers felt. It's like they couldn't quite grasp the gravity of the situation.
It's a testament to that human capacity for denial, I guess, especially when we're confronted with something so incomprehensible. And remember Edith Rosenbaum, the fashion journalist? She actually compared the scene of people rushing to the lifeboats to a carnival parade. It's such a jarring image, but it really highlights how differently people process shock and fear.
It's true. There's no right or wrong way to react in a situation like that. Some might find humor as a coping mechanism, while others might be completely paralyzed by fear.
Exactly. And while some were, throwing snowballs or making light of the situation, others were already facing the grim reality of what was unfolding. The book describes Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, running around with this look of absolute terror on his face. He knew the ship was doomed.
I can't even imagine the weight of that knowledge, knowing that his creation, this symbol of luxury and innovation, was about to become a tomb for so many.
It's heartbreaking, and yet, even with that knowledge, he continued to help passengers, guiding them to safety, even though his own fate was sealed. It's such a powerful example of selflessness in the face of unimaginable tragedy.
His actions speak volumes about his character. And then there's that chilling detail about the second-class passengers gathering for that hymn service, singing songs about the dangers of the sea. It's one of those eerie coincidences that it adds this whole other layer of tragedy to the event.
It really does. It's a moment that underscores the fragility of life, the unpredictable nature of fate. And speaking of unpredictable, let's talk about the lifeboats. The fact that there weren't enough for everyone on board it's a haunting reminder of the lack of preparedness, the disregard for safety regulations at the time.
It's a tragedy within a tragedy. And it really fuels that controversy surrounding those who did manage to escape, like the Duff Gordons. Their decision to basically row away from the sinking ship, leaving so many behind, it sparked outrage, accusations of cowardice.
And rightfully so, I'd say. Their actions raised serious questions about class privilege, the different standards that were applied to the wealthy elite. And the book delves into Lucille's character, highlighting her need for attention, for self-promotion.
It's almost like she saw the Titanic as another stage to showcase her dramatic personality, even using the tragedy to further her fashion career.
It's a stark contrast to J. Bruce Isme, who despite his role in the tragedy, was consumed by guilt and remorse. He became this target of public outrage, even though he also risked his life to help others.
It's a reminder that assigning blame doesn't always lead to understanding or justice. Ismay's story really highlights the complexities of survivors' guilt and the long-lasting psychological effects of trauma.
Absolutely. He lived the rest of his life under the shadow of that night, haunted by what he'd witnessed and the weight of the decisions that were made. And his story is just one example of the many survivors who struggled with the psychological aftermath of the sinking. The book does a fantastic job of bringing those personal struggles to light. We see individuals who are plagued by nightmares, guilt, the inability to escape the memories of that night.
Like William A. Lucas, the crew member who was haunted by his decision to turn away two women from his lifeboat. He carried the weight of their deaths, believing that he had condemned them by denying them a place.
It's a heavy burden to bear. And then there's Anna Demesmaker, who became so distraught after being separated from her husband that she was eventually institutionalized. It's a heartbreaking illustration of how devastating and long-lasting trauma can be.
And these stories, they really emphasize the importance of recognizing and addressing trauma, something that wasn't widely understood or even acknowledged back then. Makes you think about how many others suffered in silence, their emotional scars hidden from view.
It's a sobering thought. But amidst all these tales of tragedy and hardship, Shadow of the Titanic does offer glimpses of hope and resilience as well.
Oh, absolutely. Jack Thayer's determination to live a full life, despite the trauma he endured, is a testament to the human spirit's ability to adapt and overcome. And the story of the Navratil brothers, their reunion with their mother, it offers this beacon of hope and healing in the midst of such darkness.
Their story and the fact that it resurfaced decades later thanks to the efforts of a fellow passenger, it speaks to the enduring power of human connection and the importance of finding meaning even in the face of tragedy.
It's a reminder that even though the Titanic sank over a century ago, its story continues to unfold, offering new perspectives and insights as we learn more about the lives of those who are on board.
Exactly. And that's where the book's exploration of Titanic fever comes in. It captures those waves of fascination that have gripped the public over the years, from the immediate aftermath to the more recent resurgence of interest sparked by, the discovery of the wreck in '85.
And with each wave, there's this renewed desire to understand, to connect with those who experienced that night firsthand, to grapple with the larger questions about humanity that the tragedy raises.
It's like the Titanic serves as this mirror reflecting our own anxieties and fascinations with mortality, disaster, the human capacity for both good and evil.
And it's that human element that Shadow of the Titanic captures
Yeah.
so well. It takes us beyond the historical event itself and invites us to consider the individual stories, the lives that were forever altered by that night.
It's a book that really stays with you long after you finish reading it, prompting reflection on themes of survival, guilt, resilience, the power of memory.
It makes you wonder what choices you would have made in their shoes and how you would have coped with the aftermath.
And it reminds us that even though the Titanic sank over a century ago, its story continues to resonate with us today, offering valuable lessons about human nature, societal structures, the enduring power of hope in the face of adversity.
Shadow of the Titanic is such a compelling read. It offers this really unique perspective on a tragedy that continues to captivate the world. Before we wrap up this deep dive, what struck you the most from all the stories we've discussed today?
It's tough to choose just one, but I keep coming back to those stories of the survivors who managed to find a way to turn their experience into something positive. Helen Churchill Candy, Renee Harris, their resilience and their determination to embrace life despite the immense loss they suffered. It's incredibly inspiring. It really reinforces the idea that even in the face of unimaginable tragedy, the human spirit can not only, endure, but also thrive.
Their stories they're like a beacon of hope amidst all the tragedy and the loss. And for me, it's the stories of those survivors who grappled with guilt and trauma that really hit home. It makes me think about all the unseen scars that people carry and the importance of compassion and understanding. Those stories really highlight the need for open conversations about mental health, especially given that it wasn't something that was widely understood or or acknowledge back then.
No, not at all. It's a stark reminder of how far we've come in our understanding of trauma and its impact, and it makes you think about all those who might have suffered in silence without access to the support and resources that are available today.
It's a crucial reminder that even though the Titanic sank over a century ago, the lessons we can glean from the experiences of the survivors are still relevant today.
Absolutely. And one of the most powerful lessons, I think, is the enduring power of human connection. Michel Navratil's journey to reclaim his past and find peace with the tragedy really highlights this beautifully.
His story and the story of the Orphans of the Deep, it shows that even in the darkest of times, there can be these moments of joy, healing, reconnection.
And that sense of connection, it extends to the enduring fascination with the Titanic itself. The book's exploration of Titanic fever, it's fascinating. It shows how this event continues to captivate our collective imagination
Yeah.
with each wave of renewed interest, whether it's sparked by films or documentaries or the discovery of the wreck. We're drawn back to the stories of those who were on board.
It's like we're trying to make sense of the tragedy, to find meaning in the chaos, and to connect with the human stories behind the historical event.
Shadow of the Titanic, it offers this unique lens through which to view this enduring fascination. It goes beyond the familiar narrative of the sinking and delves into the lives of the survivors and the ripple effects of that fateful night.
It challenges us to consider the choices that people made in the face of unimaginable circumstances, the societal structures that contributed to the tragedy, and the complexities of human nature in the face of both adversity and opportunity.
It's a captivating and thought-provoking read that I think will resonate with anyone who's interested in the Titanic and the lasting impact it's had on our collective consciousness.
For those of you who wanted to delve deeper into the human side of the Titanic story, we highly recommend checking out Shadow of the Titanic by Andrew Wilson. You can find an affiliate link to purchase the book in the description of this episode.
It's a book that will stay with you long after you finish reading it, prompting reflection on the power of resilience, the complexities of guilt and trauma, and the enduring strength of the human spirit.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Shadow of the Titanic. We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deeper.